Hey. Hey
Good
guys,
morning.
things are good. So, where are we live at right now, Scott?
We are live on Facebook
Dude, that's the place to be.
on the
So,
Thunderworks
this is
Games
Scott
Facebook
Bogan, and I'm Keith Mateka from Thunderworks Games, and we are here to talk about Cape May, New Jersey, with the new game that's on pre-order at the Thunderworks Games site, and will be coming out in the fall. And I think it would be cool to sit down and chat about like the development of this title and why and basically kind of the process of kind of bringing this from design to publication and just kind of answer people's questions about the game, because I know there's still there's still questions. There's like we've released some information about it, including the rule book, and it's available for play online, but people still may have questions about the game as well. So I don't know. Let's start at the beginning. So,
start.
my experience with Cape May is I met the designer Eric Mosso at PAX Unplugged 2018. Yeah, 20. I think it's 2018. No, it wasn't. No, it was Origins. I'm sorry, I apologize. It was Origins 2018, and he had been emailing me about this game, and I said, yeah, sure, I can check it out on at Origins, and because I was going to be there, and um, it was a city building game, and it seemed interesting enough, so I sat down and played it, and Eric was like super excited to show me, like I guess to be expected, but like he had the game all set up. He had like some of his buddies come and like take some of the player spots, and then he basically come and grab me from my booth, and I sat down and got introduced to all his friends, and we sat down and we played it. I played a bunch of it, and it was one of those things where like you sit down and you're like, oh, you get taught the game, and you're like, that has some Euro elements that I'm familiar with and interested in, and then like we played it, and there was like I just had this feeling like there was something cool about this game. There's something special about it that I thought was something I was excited about. It was super fun. I like, I think at its heart, it's kind of an economic game. So like, and I like economic games, but it was not like a super heavy one, but still had a lot of interesting decisions. And I told Eric that I was interested in it, and Eric is an interesting guy, because he's not like super computer savvy, right? So
Yeah.
all his materials, everything was hand drawn, including this massive board, which was on this piece of drafting paper that he illustrated himself, and he like drew a little like some birds on there, and then, like Cape May Lighthouse and stuff. But like at the time, I had never heard of the city of Cape May. I was like, I thought it was like a fictional place or something, and then he let me know, like, oh no, it's a real place. It's in New Jersey. It's this resort town, and it has this interesting history. So I was like, oh, I'm even more interested because it was kind of an interesting setting. And then I brought it home, and we played it, right, Scott? So I don't remember. Do you remember the
Yeah.
first time you played Cape May?
Yeah, I do. And it was interesting for you to talk about how it kind of had that something special in it, right? It was almost hard to put your finger on it, but I think part of it was, um, you know, being unique, right? It's like something I hadn't played a game quite like this before, and especially with the different elements that at first glance don't appear like they would work together on paper, but when you play it, they actually do. And what I'm talking about is, you're building buildings and you're upgrading them, but then you're also bird watching.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's interesting, but man, is that a heck of a lot of fun, because a lot of the strategy in Cape May is moving around that game board and getting to the areas that you'd like to build in. But sometimes it's nice to kind of do something along the way, which is the bird set collection. Now I can move faster to another area of the board if I want and avoid the birds possibly, but hey, those birds are worth points in the game, and it's kind of, and that kind of reaching into a bag and pulling out a bird is just very satisfying in many ways.
Yeah, there's I remember. I mean, I was kind of known early in playtests of being like the bird guy, so I'm like,
Yes.
give me the birds.
Yes.
But so yeah, so we brought it back and we play tested it some, and you and I and James Ryan, who has done a bunch of work on Role Play Adventures, and some other folks. We just kind of played it a bunch, and everybody liked it. I mean, obviously, people have feedback. Like, well, even on finished games, people have feedback. But
Right.
there's quite a. We kind of came up with our list of things that we thought we would want to change if we, as we move forward. And we signed the contract with Eric, and kind of letting him know that, like, the process is going to take a while, just because these things take a long time, and we wanted to do some additional development on it to add some more polish and make sure it's like as awesome as it can be.
Yeah, and even before then, we we had a period of time where we, after first playing it, you first played it with him, at the con, and then it was sent to us, and then it was sent back to him with our list of suggestions, and then he worked on it, I think, for a number of months, probably 3 months or more, to refine it.
Right.
Came back to us that second time, and then that was when we went, okay, this is closer, but it still had. I don't know. I think we kind of threw a percent on it just because that's what people do. Like, okay, this is about 85, 90% ready. I think we said something like that. But there were some key things that really needed to be worked on in this game. Number one being an economic type game it was of utmost importance that we sort of get the numbers right, that it doesn't feel unbalanced to be paying more toward the beach and a lot less toward the top of the map, and just making sure that the difference kind of made sense from a game balance standpoint.
Right.
And as well as building buildings that, you upgrade them and you get some residual income from those buildings now. And, that also is a graduated scale based on where you're building. So there's a lot of sort of like math and Excel spreadsheet work to be done. My friend Dave Schneider actually played a big role in that and just kind of crunching numbers for me during development. So there's other things to look at.
For people who haven't played the game, which is pretty much a lot of people, but like there's 4 zones in the game where you can build stuff, and then and the more expensive ones are nearest the coast, and then the least expensive ones are furthest away from the coast. But then, and when you build the high-end residential buildings, they're called landmarks.
Mm-hmm.
They are worth a ton of points per building, but they're worth a lot of points near the coast, but not so much not near the coast, away from the coast.
Mm-hmm.
But on the opposite side of that, there's a majority scoring per zone at the end of the game, and the majority points that you get on the cheapest land actually gives you the most points. So like there's this interesting balance between, like, do you try to put out a bunch of things and cover as much as you can on the cheaper places, or are you trying to build like really expensive buildings on the coast, or somewhere in between, which are kind of the 2 middle zones. So there's definitely a lot of different methods in terms of like paths to victory on this game, and that's one of them. Is like, where do you want to build your buildings, and like how far do you want to develop each one?
And from a player interaction standpoint, the majority buildings per zone is a very large interaction point in the game, because especially you're gonna find in especially the higher player counts, 3 and 4 players, you have people building all over that board, and you get to the middle of the game and you're like, my buddy Keith here has one more cottage or one more building than I do up in the upper zone, and that's worth 12 points or 12 or 14 points at the end of the game. It's like, man, if I just build one more, I can tie and split the points with them. But if I build 2 more, those points are mine. So it really becomes a really cool player interaction element. Not to mention people just buying up lots that you were kind of aiming to buy up yourself. So it's like, I need to get here quickly before my buddy does. So yeah, there's
and then
elements.
What I think is interesting, there's this idea of activity cards in the game. And they're kind of dual use cards. oftentimes they will give you a discount of doing something specific, or they'll let you move to a specific location faster. And when you're in those situations and there's somebody's like pulling away on the majority of something, and you're like, wait, I want to stop them, but my character's on the other side of the board. You use these activity cards to kind of create these shortcuts to kind of accomplish the things that you're trying to do. So like clever use of the cards that you get are kind of one of the tools you can use to get yourself out of a jam or to accomplish something that seems just a little bit too far away. And you can use these cards to get it done. And that feels really good. It's like, when there's something that you want to do that it feels like out of reach, and you're like, I played this card that I have, which lets me do it. That always feels good. So
yeah, and you get the cool thing about the activity cards. And this was something that during the development of Cape May that we changed. Like the activity cards were kind of this thing we knew we wanted to keep in the game, but we needed to figure out, how exactly to implement them the best way. And what we ended up deciding on and loving was that at the beginning of every season, including the beginning of the game, everyone gets 2 of them to start with for free. So you get, throughout the course of the game, you will have 8 of these activity cards for free to use. You don't have to spend actions to get them. However, you may spend actions to get more of them,
right.
Which is very interesting. And what Keith was saying about the movement, in the example I have up on the screen, this is kind of a cool one. The one that has a little wagon wheel on it talks about being able to move a number of spaces equal to the current round number. So like normally, you're using your hand of movement cards that you have, which run from 1 to 7. You're playing those and moving along the board, sometimes paying money to move, depending upon, if it's 1 or 2 spaces, you're actually paying money to move. If it's 6 or 7 spaces, you're paying money to move. But these, now if I play this card, I can just look at the round number and go, well, it's round 11. I'm going to move 11 spaces. So yeah, it's they're very interesting in how they work and give you lots of options. I'm going to throw up the movement cards here while I'm at it, since we're talking about them, and you can kind of see what they look like. They come in all the player colors.
Right. So then the way this works is that you have a hand of these cards at the beginning of the game, and then if you want to move your character 3 spaces, one of the actions is you play your 3 card, and you can move your character 3 spaces. But so the middle, and you don't get them back until you take an action to bring all your action cards back to your hand, which you've seen maybe in games like Concordia or something like that. So that's not an unusual. It's not a unheard of mechanic, but it's familiar to some people. But I always like it. The thing that's interesting is that the highest numbers and the lowest numbers, you actually have to pay money in addition to just playing the card. So those, you want to use you got to be wise with how you use your cards. And then also, as you can see on this image of the board, there's those little kind of 3 chevron arrows, and that indicates that's a one-way street. So you can't go backwards there. If you want to hit that location that you just passed, you got to go around the block, or you got to play a card that lets you, basically break that rule. So, and those cards turn out really amazing looking, in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah, and in order to get your cards back, you have to spend an action to pull them back into your hand. So, and you can do that at any point. I mean, maybe you just want to get your 5 card back. You've only used 3 cards in your hand. You can spend an action to grab those 3 cards back again if you want. But again,
or you could play your 3 and your 2 over 2 actions, and that 2 is going to cost you $1 too. So like, that's the alternate way to do it, but it's it has different expenses, different costs, I should say.
That's right. The ultimate is say you have a full hand of cards, all 7 of them. You play your 2, move your 2, maybe grab a bird token, spend an action to grab the 2 again, and then play the 2 again. You can actually do that. Right. Maybe not the best use of your time, but there's just a lot of flexibility in how to approach the game, which is what makes the game so interesting. There's just so many ways to go about it.
Right. I mean, we talked about actions for a little bit, but that for me was a thing early, like that took a long time to solve, and it seems like a simple thing, but one of my bigger concerns about the game is that I thought it was a little long, and I know different people have different tolerances for game length, but mine is pretty short. So, and I always wanted the game to be a little shorter. And so for a long time, and as Eric had delivered it, there was every turn, everybody had 4 actions. And then, through a lot of trial and error and testing and trying to find the perfect solution, Scott mentioned there's that moment where you get dealt 2 of these activity cards each round, and basically what we ended up doing is just reducing it down to 3 actions every turn, and then you get these free cards every every 3 turns, basically. So what that does is it gives people similar options than having 4 full actions, but it definitely kind of tightens in the decision space, and it shortened the game a significant amount too. So that was a really good change that we actually changed. It took us a while to kind of get there.
It did. I mean, I almost think. I think maybe when we first started out, there might have been 5 actions, and then it became 4. For the longest period of development, it was 4 actions,
right.
And then literally, kind of just before wrapping up the game, we started testing it with 3 action. We're like, wow, this really works. It really tightens up the gameplay. It makes everything you do more consequential, which is just fun. And you can finish the game within 2 hours easily once you know how to play. So
with the full complement of players.
Yep.
Obviously, less players, it's a shorter game. But 2 things I want to ask you about.
Yeah. Oh,
so what are these? There's these little bonuses you get when you upgrade commercial buildings, and they're kind of a big deal.
Yes.
But this is a piece that was added during development. So why don't you talk about that?
Sure. And gosh, and that's the one thing I did not put preload into my screens here. I don't think. Let me actually see if I have them here to show people. I don't, but they're easy enough to describe. So, throughout the game, you're going to be, building buildings as we've discussed, and here we have pictured, these are shop tiles and business build miniature buildings. So the first stage is you'd be building a shop. And when you build a shop, your income will go up on the income track. And it's actually pictured there on the screen for you. You can see that little track there, at least a part of it. And the more you pay, so if you're building, right on the beachfront, a shop, that income is going to go significantly far up, much more so than if you build in another area. And then if you want to, you can pay a little bit more to upgrade it into a business, and your income will bump up a little bit more. But what we found when we were first playing the game is that it just wasn't enough to give people income for buying that upgrade. And a lot of people weren't ever doing it. They're like, I'm just happy building the one, getting the income from it, and moving on to do other things. So, but we also like the idea of being able to upgrade, because it melds with the fact that, you're building cottages, Victorians, and then upgrading them to landmark. It balances well with that mechanic. So what we decided to do was to introduce a bonus reward. We call them upgrade cards. And the way that works is if you upgrade your shop to a business, you get an upgrade card that has a special ability on it that will either be an immediate reward, such as, hey, draw an activity card. Or if you upgrade it into another area that's a little closer to the beach, it might be draw immediately 2 activity cards. You may also get a bonus discount on all future builds for upgrading to Victorian homes, or a discount on all future upgrades to upgrading to landmark. You also may just grab a pure points. So like if you build in the top section, you're just going to grab a 1-pointer. If you grab all the way one down on the beach, you might find 4 pointers in that stack.
Right.
The way we've done it is we've laid them out where it's a face down stack with one face up upgrade card that you can see. And so you'll have the option of taking the one that's visible, or drawing 2 off the top of the deck and keeping one and then tucking the other one back underneath. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. There's ongoing abilities, there's once per turn abilities, and there are immediate abilities in there. And they're all quite fun. There's also some end game scoring options in there too that will boost some of the things that you're doing, and give you bonus victory points. So
right.
Yeah, and it ended up people seem to love it, and now people are upgrading their businesses because they want these special perks.
Right. and so that was a cool piece that we added during the development process, which was fun. And we briefly talked about birds. So bird watching is a thing in this game. You go to certain locations and you get to draw out of a bag, and this is kind of set collection. So you're trying to get sets of different types of birds. And then there's a wild bird, which you can see right there above the binoculars with the question mark, and that is an extinct bird, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
is that
it's
right?
a passenger pigeon. Yes.
Passenger pigeon. So, but at this time, the passenger pigeon still existed. Yes. But at least to scientists' best knowledge at this point, it's extinct. Yeah. I have a sneaky suspicion one will pop up in like 20 years. And then, every once in a while you see those in the news, like, thought to be extinct. They found 10 of these birds, and you're like,
that would be a minor miracle. That would be amazing.
Nice job, Mother Nature. And then there's some that are just straight up points. So like you can see in there, the hot air balloon is just worth some points, 2 points, and then the Hindenburg is there. So that is like an interesting piece of history during that time, because the Hindenburg, it crashed on the east coast of the U.S., but not in Cape May, but it flew past Cape May during this time period. Yeah. So we thought it would be kind of a cool thing to include, just like a little piece of history. So there's a little blurb about the history behind why it's there in the rule book.
There's if you Google Hindenburg and Cape May and video or film, someone actually took live film of the Hindenburg in Cape May of it flying over, which is really kind of cool. I mean, that's a long time ago. So
is that what you? Yeah, I was thinking about that Led Zeppelin album cover or whatever. Is that the Hindenburg crashing? Is that what
I don't know. I know a friend who would know for sure, but
if you know about the Hindenburg,
I know which cover you're talking about.
Somebody in the comments can say something about it.
Yeah, someone will know that right away. More about the bird set collection. So there's 7, and maybe a lot of you have already counted them, but there's 7 different types of birds that you can have in your collection, and the object is to collect as many different birds as you can, not the same bird. So if you can get like the maximum number of birds, it's going to be worth a lot of points. And the nice thing is you can also kind of create the sets as you want. So if you have 6 birds and maybe some of them are duplicates, you'll shift those down into another set, and then you come up with the best way to put those sets together for your maximum points. Remember when I talked about those upgrade cards? I kind of like this. There is a business upgrade card down on the beach that you can pick up that'll allow you to get bonus points for having some of the same bird. So for matching bird sets, it allows you to get up to 6 points for up to 3 different matching sets of birds. So it's kind of like if you're playing the heavy bird game, you might want to go down to the beach and try to find that card to even get more points at the end of the game.
So I like anecdotes, right? So remember we were working on this game, and we contacted Michael Menzel, and he's working on the art or whatever, and like the birds were done, like pretty much. And I was my rep at Panda Manufacturing.
I know what you're gonna say.
His name's Steven Wren, and he is very he's always interested in like things that are coming up. So I like show him stuff just because like we've been working together for so long, and he's a friend of mine at this point. So, and I was showing him the bird stuff, and like I guess I didn't realize like he was a pretty big birdie, as they say. Like people are big into bird watching, which I'm not, but I have an appreciation for people who do like that kind of stuff. And he's like, that looks like a bird X. That bird X is only habitates in these environments, not near Cape May. I was
the
like,
Galapagos Islands. In fact, it was a little far. It was a little far away from New Jersey.
And I was like, oh, like obviously, like Eric had done some level of research on what birds were appropriate, and like you had done some level of research, but like some of these things kind of just slipped through as to. So we basically had to go back to Michael. Well, actually, Scott went through all the birds that we had and triple checked that every one of those birds is something that would possibly could be seen in Cape May.
We'll use the word possibly. Yes. That's good.
And then there's some that like 2 of them I think that like were clearly not appropriate. So then we had to go back to Michael and have him like re-illustrate a couple. Scott picked a couple different birds that we should do that made sense, and we had to go have those re-illustrated. So I've got some illustrations of some birds that don't live near Cape May.
Well, when we released the Cape May Zoo edition, those would be included. You can visit the zoo and get the exotic birds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty good chance they'll never see the light of day, but you never know. It's interesting. As like a side story, I had some illustrations that we had for role player Fiends of Familiars that never got used because we changed something for whatever reason, and then. But then I was able to kind of use them in other role player products. So like one of the cards that's in Role Player Adventures was a card that was painted for Fiends of Familiars that we never used, for example. So, I mean, I guess anything's possible. Those birds could come back someday.
Yes. Kind of looking at we also have, it'd be interesting to mention the event cards in the game and how we sort of developed those. Initially, Eric, who designed the game, he had events in the game, and they were kind of fun. They do kind of add that element of like, you don't know what's coming up, and some of them are a little punitive, but we wanted to make sure they weren't too punitive, like where you get just negative cards all the time and you're like, oh, well, this stinks, like why are we playing this? There are lots of cards in the events, and they all reflect historical things. So there's like historical flavor text on them, and it really adds to the element of history in the game. And I think there's like 26 of them, I think is what we have in the game, and it's only 12 rounds. So like, every game really with those odds is going to be quite different. They're going to come out in a different order, and you're going to get new cards coming out. But we also kind of made sure that the majority of the cards, I think it's something like 65% or 70% of them now are positive events.
Right.
So you're gonna benefit by, maybe on a particular round, anybody who decides to upgrade to Victorian, gets a discount. Or you might even get everyone gets to draw a bonus bird or something like that.
And what's kind of nice about those cards too is that the game naturally is divided into 4 seasons, and some of the cards, like the effect is different based on what season it is. So just because you saw card X in the previous game and you see it in the current game, the effect is likely to be different because it's probably going to be drawn at a different season.
Right, the Hurricane is a really good example of that one, because that one has affects all players equally. You're basically going to have to lose random movement cards from your hand during the Great Atlantic Hurricane. So it kind of affects everyone equally, but every season will have you losing a different amount. I think I made the summer Hurricane the worst. But anyways, it's pretty cool. Even though it's a bummer, it's kind of fun because it's not like one person is getting hit with it. Everybody gets hit with it.
So can you talk about, like, I know you did, I think you did a fair amount of like historical research on Cape May during that time period, and like how you picked and choose like what things were kind of good, interesting things to include in the game, and et cetera.
Yeah. So I ended up buying a well-regarded hardcover book on the history of Cape May as part of the process. And because I thought it was important to not only sort of double check the historical events that Eric put in the game. He didn't have any, he didn't have the flavor text in there at all. He didn't, he just, mentioned an event, and, I kind of wanted to know more about it. And so when I started researching and reading this hardcover book on the history of Cape May, just lots of stuff just started popping up. Kind of like, wow, that would be a good event card. One of them, like there's like an odd one that's like cottagers, as in cottagers association formed. I'm like, on the surface that sounds boring, but in game terms, I'm like, yeah, we're building cottages in this game. There should be an event sort of related to this association that formed, because people were, at that time, people were finally starting to vacation in Cape May, and it started, Cape May started growing and becoming this really cool place to visit back in the Victorian era, competing with Atlantic City even at the time. It was kind of a more laid back, relaxed environment that people went to. I'm like, you read things like that, and that they just kind of immediately spur an idea for a particular event. And other things, if you read any history about Cape May, no history fails to mention the fact that they had devastating fires in Cape May. In fact, it was the impetus for Eric to sort of create the game. They had a fire that destroyed just a huge part of the city back in the day. And the people of Cape May, rather than pack their bags and leave and say, this is ridiculous, they rebuilt this town. And so 3 of the events in the game reflect fires on different parts of the board, but we didn't want to make, because, ultimately, my goal in developing the game was like, I want this to be fun. I don't want to be, hitting people and being like, hey, your cottage burned down, there's a fire, and you had to rebuild it. That's not very fun. So what we did with the fires is we said, hey, in this section of the board, during the current round, everything in this section now costs an extra $2. So, we sort of did things like that, tied it to history, and then incorporated it as kind of a fun element into the board game. So we should talk about that elephant card too, because that
I was going to ask 2 things. One was, hey, Scott, what's your favorite event card? Because I know what the answer is. And then I have another question, a more general question after that. Go ahead.
Sure. So the I don't remember how it came up. I think I found this on an online search, and I'm looking around doing some historical research on Cape May, and I see this photograph of this giant elephant statue in Cape May, and it's like, why it didn't come up in my book.
What was it made out of? Was it tin or something?
Shoot, I don't remember what it was made out of, but it was kind of hollow. But
Right.
the thing was enormous. It was made, it's called the Light of Asia.
Right.
And it had a viewing platform on the back of this elephant, and people had to climb up a staircase inside the elephant to get to this viewing platform to overlook the beach, and people would pay to do this. So an entrepreneur, brought this thing in as kind of this crazy attraction. And so we thought this would be a really cool event card, like the appearance.
Right. It's like such a cool thing and kind of unique. They're like, how can we not mention it? Right.
It's so weird. Yeah. So we ended up creating the event card, and what we did with it made it really, really fun. Everybody loves this event card to come up. Everybody gets an additional action for the round in which that event card appears. Now, I will add, and we should add this, is that is a bonus card that does not come in the base game normally, but if you pre-order through the Thunderworks Games website, that's going to be included, as well as a 11 card vocation mini expansion that we'll be adding. So a quick thing about the elephant, I could talk about the elephant all day, Keith, is I think it only lasted like a few years, and they tore it down. Why did they tear it down? Because it was super cool and it looked really weird, and people seem to like it. Well, there's a lighthouse in Cape May that was much taller than the actual viewing platform and the elephant. So the elephant was just a bad idea from the start. People are like, I'm gonna go up in the lighthouse to get a view of the area, not this elephant.
Right.
So
you gotta like start the elephant like when the lighthouse is being renovated, nobody can go up there or something like.
Right.
So I wanted to ask like a kind of a bigger picture question, which is like, okay, we brought the game, back from Eric after the conventions. He mailed us stuff, and we played a couple games and got some questions answered and went back and forth and signed contracts and stuff. But like at that point, there was this moment of like, we know this game probably needs some more work. We had it like 80%, 90%, and obviously that last 10% of anything is a lot of like, polishing something to those last 10% is a ton of work.
It is.
And you basically said, hey, I want to work on this. So like talk about, what made you say that, and what made you kind of excited to work on it, and like how was that experience for you, and how do you feel like it turned out, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, I was sort of like kicking the tires on the idea, right? Like I had been doing a lot of work for you, kind of in the marketing realm and the social media realm. And, I've been a gamer for, I guess dating myself, like 35 years, something like that. I was playing games way back in the day. And so, I've had a lot of experience with games. I know it's fun. And I knew this game was fun right out of the gates. And I was super excited about this, Keith, you grabbing this game and wanting to publish it, and I think part of it was that I think you saw that. I could tell that like Scott really likes this game, especially. And so I think I couldn't wait to kind of just jump in there and start working on it, because I immediately had ideas, for it that I wanted to try. And so the experience was interesting because, as Keith mentioned earlier in this, is that everything that Eric provided was handwritten. Even the cards. I mean, they were in card protectors, but it was all in pencil. Not even marker or pen, or anything like that. It was in pencil, including the board. So the very first part of the project of doing this was to digitize everything and like recreate it, in Photoshop and everything, so that we could make changes on the fly, make them quickly, print them out. The number of cards that I had to cut out is astronomical. Probably thousands of cards. I'd employ my family to do that. As changes were coming, we'd be watching a show. We'd all be cutting the new event cards out, or the upgrade cards, or what have you, to test them. So that was a big part of the project that I remember. But then once that happened, then kind of the more fun part begins, playing it with friends and family, taking it to one of the proto spiels to play test. We took it to a few of them. Keith took it to one to play test, and I took it to one in Milwaukee, and to get people's feedback on it. That was a really big part of it. Was with any game, you shouldn't be creating any game in a vacuum, where you're just playing it at home with one, group of people. You want to play with lots of people, get lots of feedback, and that will not only reaffirms some of the things that you are changing, because maybe you play it a couple of times and people are sort of complaining, not complaining, but people are sort of pointing something out, and then when you change it and you don't point it out anymore, you're like, yeah, that's probably the right thing to do. It was the right tweak to make. I thought the whole experience was exciting and fun. It was a long road, longer than I thought it would be. Because things just were coming up. We just keep thinking of ideas like to make it better, and eventually you just have to kind of go, okay, this is good. This is a good game right now.
I mean, we simmered this game for a long time, right? Like, a lot of times when you're developing a game, you make choices, which means you leave other things, like the opposite choice, behind. But on this project, we were definitely interested in trying new ideas, even though maybe we weren't sure. It wasn't clear that it was going to be a move forward. It might be a sideways move, it might be a backwards move, but we wanted to try it anyway. So we did that a lot on this game.
The first player marker is a good example of that. How long that was in the game? Like the
way the first player worked in this game kept changing, and it's such a small thing, but we changed it quite a few times of how it worked, and in the end, it kind of operates
the way it does in most games.
It does in most games, right? We started in one place that was close to how it worked in most games, and then we complicated it. We were hoping to find some more interesting decision points, and then over a lot of playtesting, it turned. We just figured out that hey, this is like adding more confusion than fun. So
it became a mini game of like trying to take it away from people. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? When you really came down to it, people would just like be confused, and then we'd hand it to somebody. They're like, well, so at the end of the turn, then it like.
Right, we just had two player markers at one time.
We even had the binoculars case that we handed to people to indicate where the binoculars go at the end of the round. So it just became like, it's like, wait, hey, that's just way too many questions about this mechanic. We just, let's get rid of it.
So one of the biggest contributions. I was gonna say contributions. Contributions. On this project is that you took over the solo mode for this game. So Eric had delivered a certain solo mode that and you did a lot of testing with it. Scott plays a lot of solo games. I do too. But Scott plays more than I do, and he did a lot of playing on it. And then and he found that there were some things that probably needed work. So he did quite a bit of reworking of the solo mode to the point in which it's basically do you want to talk about that?
Hey, we switched places. I don't know how
it's so much nicer over here.
Oh man, that's so weird. I was clicking around. What I realize is when you do that, I think we might lose audio at a certain point. But so sorry about that if we cut out for a second. So you're asking me about the kind of the solo and kind of how it
talk about the history of the solo mode, because it's
sure. Yeah,
what Eric delivered and versus what's in the box are pretty significantly different.
Significantly different. Yeah. So so Eric's initial design involved this ghost called Emlyn Physic. And Emlyn Physic is a sort of one of the early founders, mover and shaker in the early Cape May scene. There's a big mansion in in Cape May called the Emlyn Physic Estate. It's actually a place you can tour and everything. And in the board game, you actually start up by the Emlyn Physic Estate. So it kind of became the default starting space in the game. Well, anyways, it's rumored to be haunted. He's supposed to be this ghost in Cape May, and so the original designer Eric decided that you would sort of move around town, building the way you are, but this ghost would be chasing you the entire time, and he had a die in there. You'd roll a die, and you'd move it so many spaces, and when it caught up to you, you would sort of draw this ghost card, and usually something bad would happen to you. But that was really the kind of the extent of the solo system, and it was one of these games where you just try to like beat your previous score, like do better than last time, which is fine in some games. But I really wanted the experience to be one where you kind of felt like you were playing against another person, and you were playing a game of Cape May, but without having to micromanage that other player's actions too. So that was the challenge that it set up. The challenge was, hey, let's make it feel like you're playing against a real player, but let's not have you like doing everything a real player does. So that really is kind of a challenge. And so what we did is we created these, I created these solo cards, and you can see them really tiny on the screen. I don't have a larger image of them. Where at the start of every round, the AI activates. The AI is named after my daughter, Ava. So you're playing against my daughter, Ava. There's 4 different difficulty levels. And what you're doing is you're turning over a card in the deck, and depending upon the season, it's telling you where the AI builds. So it can be shops or cottages. And then there's a couple of icons on each of the solo cards. And the icons will basically are telling you other things that the AI is doing. For example, upgrading something on the board. So taking their shop and turning it into a business, or taking their cottage and turning it into a Victorian home, or even advancing on a bird track, because the AI is looking for birds as well. So all of these elements are included in the AI, but it's all handled on the back side of the normal player boards. I don't have a picture of the AI board, but I have a picture of the regular board that looks like this. So when you flip these player boards over, you'll have the AI board. So you just pick the difficulty you want, and each season, what's happening is you're kind of moving down the AI board. So when summer comes along, you kind of move the AI token to summer, and then there are a couple of actions that are potentially going to happen during that season, depending upon the difficulty level that you have.
Right. So the idea is that there's this 4-player game. There's 4 different player boards, 1 for each player. And then if you flip them all over, they've got 4 different single-player AI difficulties. So it allows you to, if you can start on the easy one, and then as you get better at the game, kind of try to graduate and try to beat the hardest level of them all, which is quite difficult, as Scott can attest to.
Yeah, it can be pretty challenging. And it's interesting, with the 12 cards, because, some couple of those cards in there have you reshuffle the deck too, so you can have the same card come up one behind the other sometimes. It's rare, 1 in 12 chance each time. But some really interesting things start to happen. And this also kind of brings to light the fact that we have a double-sided board.
Right.
Both of them are shown here. If you look closely, you can see one board has a lot more areas filled in with illustrations than the other. The one on the right is the one that we use for 1 to 2 players, and then the one on the left is the one for 3 to 4 players. Just more places to build.
Yep.
So I think that's about it with I'm trying to think. So the scoring, like even the AI will, when they upgrade to businesses, they will take one of the upgrade cards, and those are worth points for the AI at the end of the game. The bird track may or may not go way up on any given game.
Yeah. I mean, I like during the process, like you went through multiple kind of design paths, right? There were times where you basically went down this like path and ended up like scrapping the whole thing and kind of starting over to some degree. And obviously, like you were working on it, and you would come and show me, and I would give you feedback on the stuff that you were working on until you landed on a spot that you really liked, which is what we ended up publishing. But like it took a long time to get there, right?
It did. Yeah, it definitely went from kind of messy to elegant, and that but that. Yeah, that, like you said, took a really long time to get to there. Like, it's easy to overdo stuff. It's easy to kind of like, in my effort to not have the other play, to not have you micromanaging the other player, I was having you micromanage the other player. Like it was just like, I want this to really feel like another person playing. And so it was easy to overdo it in that way.
Well, I mean, I think one of the most difficult things, game designers struggle with is like, how, what do I cut? What is the piece here that is essential and the core of the fun, and what pieces here are cool but probably add more complexity than is necessary? Like I think that's I think designers struggle with that all the time. It's like when I go to Protospiels and I give people feedback on the designs, or I get designs feedback on my own, most of the conversations are like, is this really necessary? Is this really necessary? Like, cut this game in half and make it and it's going to be twice as fun if you cut it in half, like kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of like wrapping this up a little bit is that we didn't mention is it reminding me of the secret bonus goals that we have. I'm kind of thinking about end game scoring now, and we didn't mention the bonus cards, but you get 4 of them at the start of the game, these bonus cards for points. And you keep 2 of them, and so they become a method of driving your strategy in the game. And you don't necessarily have to pay attention to them, but I mean, most people do because they're extra points, and you're doing things that are already giving you points. They're just giving you a lot more points if you can do it exactly as the card specifies. Some of them are more challenging, so there's a lot of fun. If you're just one of these players that kind of like just wants to like try stuff, this game will give you that opportunity, because some of them are like, build adjacent to churches. And the more, if you're able to get to a certain threshold, you'll get like 10 bonus points for doing that, or 8 bonus points, can't remember. But some really interesting ones in there. Building adjacent to places where you can do bird watching.
Right.
Well, when your buddy starts, filling up those spaces, you start to get worried. And now you got to like figure out a strategy to get the other ones before other players grab those spaces that are going to give you more points.
Right. I mean, the thing that I like about that kind of thing is that, like, when you sit down and play a game for the first time, you don't necessarily have a strategy in mind. You don't necessarily know what the best thing to do at any given time, especially on your very first turn. But here we give you the 2 bonus, like goal cards, and it's like, you don't know what to do on your first turn. Now you've got these goals. Like, go ahead and try to complete those. Like, it gives people direction at the beginning of the game, which I think is exciting and motivating and fun.
Yeah. Well, I think we pretty much covered just about everything in the game. And I'm just kind of look through, see if there's any like questions that we didn't already answer.
Michael asked if there was thought about bringing Kate May into the role player world. That's a no. So I mean, obviously I love role player. People love role player. There's more role player stuff coming. There's both that you know about and you don't know about. But yeah, I mean, I don't think everything from Thunderworks doesn't have to be role player related. And obviously, this is one of those titles that is kind of on its own. I kind of put it in the same kind of historical game category as we did for Dual Powers Revolution 1917. And I like that game, and I like historical games, and I like Euro games that aren't necessarily all fantasy. So Cape May is not in the role player universe, and I mean, I would say I hate saying never, but I would say never.
Yeah.
So Nelson was asking, what was the one thing from the game that made you sign? It's there is like an element. I don't actually think I talk about this very often, but there's kind of a sandboxy element to this game. It's like you've got 3 actions each turn, and you've got a bunch of stuff that you can do, and the game just kind of says, go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
And so that kind of sense of freedom of like, making, doing what I want to create my empire of buildings and rebuilding the city. Like that's the part that I, at least out of the gate, was most exciting to me. It's like,
Mhm.
I've played some sandbox style games, and I was kind of like, I never really liked them that much, to be honest. But for whatever reason, this one like just really struck a chord with me, and I really like the sense of freedom that you get when you first start playing it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have an answer to that one, Scott?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with it. It just, and we sort of talked about this early on. It just has that something that's maybe, it's weird to say it's hard to put your finger on it because it seems like we didn't think about it much, but it really did have that special element of a lot of things going on. I like games where I can, yeah, kind of like, it feels like the sky is the limit on how I approach this. And there's just so many varied ways of getting victory points, from the birds to the bonus cards to the majorities per zone to the upgrading for either upgrade cards or for getting extra points for Victorians and landmarks. And then that scales based on where you do those things, so there's just a lot of elements to it. And I also have to say, like, one of the big strategies in the game is like, when do I stop like earning more money and start using that money to do something? So, it's like income is important in the game because you need that to drive everything else in the game. But if you just do that, you're going to lose. You can't just be like, I'm just going to have shops and I win the game. You also need to be doing other things too. So it's just a really fun exercise in playing Cape May. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And Keith, this has been awesome. I want to remind people that first off, Cape May is available for pre-order. The link that I'm putting in the comments right now will take you to a page that sort of will give an overview of everything we just talked about, but also lots of links to actually pre-order the game that we're expecting to arrive in fall for people and shipping in the fall. And then the other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up is the big Lockup Kickstarter happening on Tuesday. We're going to launch. The link right now is putting that in the comments for that. That link will take you to the Kickstarter page where you can click the little button to make sure you don't forget about it. You will receive a reminder message. So we're very excited to launch that Tuesday.
And then it looks like Max was asking like for more details on Lockup. Do we have any upcoming videos where we're going to be going into more detail with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I am planning on Monday, the day before the Kickstarter, I actually have a copy of it. I can't see it, but I have a copy of Breakout behind me that I'm going to just kind of go through it with people, show everybody what's inside the box, talk a little bit about how the game plays and how it interacts with the core game. And I'll be doing that on Monday sometime. So it'll just be kind of a quick 10-15 minute overview of it so people can kind of get excited about the Kickstarter. And that should be helpful to learn more about it.
Cool.
So,
all right. George is asking about like any other historical games in the lineup that I'm willing to talk about. The answer is no. I have more fantasy role player stuff coming. There's a game called 10 Penny Parks, which was previously called Theme Parks, that there's some information on BGG about, but that's kind of more, I guess, in my family line, whatever that means. And then doing more historical stuff. I don't have anything currently that I'm talking about, so but it's something I keep an eye out for.
Yeah, fantasy historical, sort of.
What does that mean?
Yeah. I know. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll
Right. See ya.
see you later.